Hello and welcome to this episode of Drew Yaps. It's once again been a while, but life gets busy. I'm not going to be consistent with this channel, but I am going to continue to post things. I've been wanting to do more Drew Yaps recently. I just haven't gotten around to it. Part of the reason is I have a very big Drew Yaps episode that I'm working on. Um, the Goodreads Choice Awards came out end of last year. And so I've been working on reading through them and then recording my thoughts on the books. The thing is, I don't always have time to read, and when I do have time to read, sometimes there's other books I want to read. So it's a bit of slow progress, but I have gotten through 5 out of 10 of the Goodreads Choice Word books that I wanted to read. So at some point that'll be out, and that'll be, I don't know, I'd say probably like an hour and a half to 2 hours long. So you'll have a good length episode there. And there are some other stuff I want to talk about too. I recently went on my friend's radio show, so if I can get the audio from that, I'm gonna post that sometime soon. But this was something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I thought it would make a good Drew Yaps episode because it's something that I talk about with people quite a bit, and so I thought I could tell the story pretty well on Drew Yaps. Um, so I am a Christian, and I believe in God, obviously, because that's kind of what that means. But it took a long journey to get to where I'm at now. Um, I think sometimes as Christians, we can sometimes be afraid to acknowledge the fact that we weren't always following God to the capacity we should have been. Um, and we can always improve, like nobody's perfect, so it's not to say like I'm finally perfectly following God, but I just kind of wanted to tell my story of how I've got to where I am today, how I've built my faith, and hopefully it'll be interesting and maybe can motivate you as well. Because I especially know that I know some younger people who are still kind of struggling where they they go to church and they think they believe in God, but they still don't really have that like firm foundation for their faith. And that can be kind of scary because it can feel like, you're doing something wrong or like, I like that this is the right thing to believe, but you don't fully believe it. So like, what does that say about you? What does it mean for, your future? Are you gonna you gonna go to hell? Like, there can be some serious like fears attached to that. Um, so I hope that sharing my story can show that it takes time. So I grew up in a Christian family. My parents both would like help out in children's church. They weren't, I don't know if they were like actual children's pastors. I really can't remember, but I do know that they volunteered. So I was, raised with Christian beliefs and Christian morals, and I kind of just took it as for granted, like as a fact of my life that God did exist, but it didn't necessarily mean a lot to me at first, which makes sense when you're young, it's hard to understand that stuff. Um, and so I went to church. I took part in like our church's musicals that we would put on. And I went to Sunday school and I did junior Bible quiz and all these things. And it was great. I enjoyed it. But as time went on, especially once I hit middle school, then I was in, middle school Sunday school, which was great. I enjoyed that. But the issue was there was a kid service, but there wasn't like a middle schooler service. So once you hit middle school, you're just going to the main service with all the adults. And I wasn't really ready for that yet because I didn't have a great attention span and I didn't like sitting for a long time and I just like wasn't at a good enough place in my faith to really care about what the pastor had to say. So I just found it kind of boring. And I feel like that big shift from kid service to main service, that really kind of pushed me away a little bit. Um, like I didn't I I kind of stopped trying as hard to be a Christian and to learn about that stuff, especially because at that point I had also stopped doing Bible quiz. And so I really stopped trying as hard to learn and to grow because it was such a big shift that I just felt like that I wasn't ready for, and I just was bored. And so that continued on through 6th grade and through 7th grade. And I still identified as a Christian. You know, I would tell people I was a Christian and people knew me as a Christian. Um, and but I didn't, like, internally, wasn't, didn't have as strong a faith as I should have or could have if I had tried harder. Um, and it was interesting because during this time, and this also happened in high school too, but there were a lot of people would that I knew that weren't Christians that would like complain about Christians, and then they would say to me like, "Oh, but you're the exception." Which is unfortunate because it really just means they haven't met a lot of good Christians. And what it really probably means is they've met a lot of Christians, like good Christians, but they didn't know they were Christians, and so they didn't make that association. But they were just thinking about what they'd seen online with social media and whatnot of these Christians using their faith the wrong way and harming people and all these things, and they assumed that that was what most Christians are like. So it was interesting. I was glad that I could show them a more positive side of Christianity that they might not have seen, um, but also at the same time I wasn't necessarily the best example, I would say. Um, like I didn't do anything horribly bad, but um, like I said, my faith just wasn't as strong as it could have been. So that continued through 7th grade, and then toward the end of 7th grade, COVID happened. So then we hit quarantine, which meant we weren't even going to church in person. So no Sunday school and no main service. So they did service online, and we did watch it online from home, but that's just totally different. I think online church can be great if you aren't able to make it in person and if you still pay as much attention and treat it like you're there in person. But when you're in the position I was, where I already didn't like want to be at church, and I was already kind of distant from God, um, switching to no Sunday school and just watching the service online was not a good shift, because it just meant that every Sunday I would wake up and we would go into our living room and we would watch the service on the TV, and I would lay back in my seat and close my eyes and partially listen to the service and partially just try and rest. And I just like didn't care. So yeah, it wasn't good. The sermons, like, I didn't really pay attention to them because I didn't want to, and it was even easier not to pay attention when it was online. And so I it didn't do anything for me. And I just continued to grow more distant from God, as quarantine went on. And another thing that made things difficult is that I was public schooled. And I think public school is great. Like, I truly do think there are a lot of benefits to being in public school. When I have kids, I will probably want them to be in public school. Um, but there is a lot of different, worldviews and beliefs that you get introduced to in public school, like by your peers. And I think that's one of the great things about public school is you get a better understanding of the world and how to like deal with different types of people. But it also means that like if you don't have a firm foundation in your faith, then you can take on a lot of views and influences that are not so great. And that's kind of what happened. And that also happened over quarantine, because my main way of socializing with people during that time, since I couldn't really go out and do things, is I joined this Minecraft server, and it was great. It was so much fun with a bunch of people I didn't know, and I really enjoyed it. And overall, I think it did more good than bad. But it also meant that, again, there were a lot of different worldviews, and at this point, I'm not paying attention during service, and it's only online service and nothing else. um and so because of that, the primary interactions I was having and the primary, opinions and worldviews I was taking in all came from these people on this Minecraft server, which, like, Minecraft servers aren't known for, I mean, they're not necessarily not Christian, but I think especially at this period in time, like it was a lore SMP. So, it's a Minecraft server in survival where you're acting out like stories and stuff. And a lot of like lore SMPs were not specifically Christian. In fact, there actually was a very, and probably, I don't know, probably still is, I don't know, but there was a very large audience of people in especially the LGBTQ plus community who were interested in these kinds of servers. And so I mean, I think that the way a lot of Christians address and deal with the LGBTQ plus community is wrong and harmful, but I'm not going to get into that now because that's not the point of this. But there are certain influences from that were not great. um so it just got worse and worse. And by the time that I finally, started going back to school in person, it was pretty bad. That was eighth grade. Like sometime in eighth grade, beginning of eighth grade, they did this weird thing where depending on if the letter that your last name starts with, you'd either be in person Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, and then everyone was online Wednesday. It was a very strange system, and I don't totally get why they did that. But we started going back in person, and then eventually church started being in person, but we stayed online for a while. If I remember right, I checked. We didn't go back to church in person until maybe like sometime in 2022. I'm pretty sure. So we stayed watching online for quite a while, and even when we went back in person, we didn't. At least I didn't go to Sunday school for a while. Like we just were going to the main service, and I wasn't going to like the Wednesday night stuff or any of that stuff up to this point. So it still wasn't great. Being back in person really didn't help because I was still bored, and now I had like the issues with not wanting to sit still and not being able to like relax and all these things. So it's still like it wasn't any better being back in person. Plus, we waited a really long time, and I didn't have Sunday school to at least get some interaction with my peers. So yeah, it just kept going on like that for a while, and then finally, this is when things really start to change. And it's interesting to look at this. This is why I like to tell this story, because there are so many it's just interesting to see how many little decisions and little moments God puts in your life to get you in the right direction. Like there's so many just little things that if I hadn't done this one thing or made this one decision, then the whole chain of events wouldn't have happened, at least not the way they did. That's not to say I couldn't still have, come to God and built a strong faith, but, you know. So, um, this was while we were still going to church in person, but not going to Sunday school. So, sometime in 2022, there was this like thing they were doing for the kids called Fun Arts. And so it was like the fine arts competition that we do, but it was just for fun and it was for just elementary kids. And my mom signed up teach a group of kids to do puppetry for the performance. So I decided to help her out with that because I love working with kids and I have a, decent amount of experience with puppetry. So I helped her out, and then eventually it was time for the performance. And I haven't decided if I'm going to actually use people's names in this, but I think I am because I only really have positive things to say. So I'm just going to use their first name, but So up to this point, for a good portion of my life, like from early in my childhood, one of my best friends was this guy named Carter. And we were really good friends, but once COVID hit, like I had only just recently got a phone, and it was at the time I could only message through, like, I didn't have a phone plan, so I could only message using WhatsApp, which meant I could only message on Wi-Fi. And so I didn't like have anybody's phone numbers. I just was able to message my mom if I had Wi-Fi. So I didn't have Carter's phone number, and I don't even remember if he had a phone at that point, but I assume he might have. I don't know. Um, but when quarantine happened, we then didn't have a way to talk to each other. And also like I I was on the Minecraft server a lot and also like called my cousin and, a few of my other friends. So I was I don't know, I had a lot of people to talk to, and so I wasn't too worried about like even though Carter and I were very good friends, I wasn't too worried about like trying to like find him because I was like, oh, I have enough people to talk to. I'll catch up with him eventually. So that meant we didn't see each other for like 3 years. Um, and a big thing that I was missing with church was those friendships. Like I think having those connections and friendships at church really helps you to feel more comfortable and be in a better position to receive like the message because you feel safe, you feel loved, you feel happy, and you're you enjoy being in in the environment more. So I really needed friends in the church, but I didn't like realize that at the time. So at this point, I still hadn't seen Carter in years. So finally, we have our fun arts performance, and we do the puppetry, and then it's like toward the end of the whole event. I'm sitting in the back of the auditorium with my mom, and uh, Carter's mom comes over to talk to us because she's kind of helping like run the event. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, that might mean Carter's here. And then I see Carter and we like wave at him and he comes over to talk to us. So, I hadn't seen him in like 3 years. And I was kind of worried that like it was going to be awkward because it had been, a really long time. But like it was, the conversation flowed very smoothly. Surprisingly, there's, a lot to talk about when you haven't seen someone in 3 years. Um, so we just quickly caught up a little bit, and it was really good to see him. And so I got his phone number, and I said we should catch up sometime. And that was kind of it at first, but it was really nice to see him, and it kind of reinvigorated me to try and reconnect with my church friends, and particularly Carter. So I started texting Carter some, and he started encouraging me to come back to Sunday school. And so I kept telling him, I might do it, but at this point I couldn't drive, so I would have to wait till my parents were also willing to go to Sunday school again. So I kept waiting for a while, and then eventually, I think in September of 2022, I finally went back to Sunday school for the first time. And I got there. At this point, it was high school Sunday school because I was in 10th grade, maybe. I don't quite remember. Um, oh, that actually means I missed kind of an important event as well. The thing is, there's like multiple timelines of events that all led to this point. So another thing that happened was toward the end of my freshman year. I was talking, no, the end of my sophomore year. I was talking to this girl that I really, really liked, and she really liked me, and we talked for like a month, and we had like a date, but we didn't call it a date and whatever, and whatever. And so this was kind of my first time, like I'd liked girls before, but this was my first time like actually being close to success. um and then suddenly she ghosted me. Um, and that was really hard for me to deal with at the time because I it was my first time. Like, first of all, it felt like I was so close and then it just all fell apart. Um, but also, like, it was my first time, experiencing that, and I was having some mental health issues for, really since like early in middle school. I remember nights in middle school where I would just like lay in bed and just hate myself for like no reason in particular. I just didn't like myself. Um, and so that was something I've struggled with for a long time, but I didn't realize until late in high school. And I'll get to that, because that is important. But because of all of that, it was hard for me to get over. And so I was pretty depressed for like 3, 4 months. Um, and it was rough. And it got better and better and better. But it was one of those situations where I couldn't fully get closure until I could sort of face it head on. So that didn't mean like talking to her too much about it, but like I didn't fully get over it until I was back at school and like saw her and like interacted with her normally, and then I was like, okay, this is fine. Um, but at the time I was pretty depressed. And so what happened was the day so she ghosted me for like 3, 4 days, and then eventually she texted me again, and so I was like, "Hey, why did you stop messaging me?" And she basically just told me she just wanted to be friends. Um, and that night, like, I up to that point had not I hadn't prayed on my own in years. I hadn't read my Bible like at all, pretty much. I think I'd read through Genesis and maybe Exodus and then little bits of other books, and that was it. But just when I got that text, I suddenly just felt this strong urge to pray. And so I prayed about it. And obviously it didn't like fix everything immediately, but it made me feel better, just a little bit. And so after that point, I started praying every night, and I started reading through my Bible, and I actually read through the entire Bible in like 3 or 4 months, because I remember that was sometime in the summer, that like pretty early in the summer, sometime in June, that she said she just wanted to be friends, and then I finished Revelation in September. Um, so if I've got my timeline right, I think that would also be right around the time when I started going back to Sunday school. So now I'm going back to Sunday school. I've, started rebuilding that relationship with God, but like I'm praying. I've read the Bible all the way through now, but I still was not enjoying the sermons. I was not receiving the messages, because I was bored and I felt lonely and all these things. And so finally, I go back to Sunday school. Now it's the high school group. And I was kind of nervous 'cause it was a lot of people and a lot of people I didn't know. And so I just went over and I sat with Carter's group, and he was very welcoming. Um, all the guys were so good, so great to me. And the our teacher was a guy named JT. And I remember at this time, I basically wore my concert black to which was short sleeve for me, to church every week. So it was just black pants, black dress shirt, and that was what I wore every single week for a long time. And as I got more comfortable and made more friends and grew in my faith, I eventually branched out, and now I have all kinds of like funky, fun, colorful shirts, dress shirts. So I like to think that it kind of represents my growth as a person and in my faith, that I went from just wearing black all the time to very, colorful and joyful. But that's just a random thought. But anyway, so it was JT, and there were multiple new people that time when I was there. So he introduced he like stopped the lesson at one point, and he was like, "Also, we have quite a few new people here, so let's have them introduce themselves." And so people introduced themselves, the new people did, and then it got to me, And JT was like, "We've got another new person here," and like three different people were all like, "Oh, that's Drew. We know him. He's not new," and that felt really nice to know that like multiple people remembered me because like it makes sense. I went to the church for quite a few years before COVID, but still, it was really nice, and it was a reminder that like there are people that care about me. Um, so that was a good, kicking off point. It was helpful to have Carter there. Um, but I was still running into an issue that I kind of felt like an outsider, um, in that like the guys all were really nice to me and we got along well, but they'd been back at church for a few years. And, I think a lot happens in that shift from middle school to high school. You change a lot as a person in some ways. In other ways, freshmen in high school are basically just still eighth graders. But there's quite a bit that changes, and because of that, um, everybody had like their friend groups that they built after quarantine, and it all felt like so new, and they all seem so connected. Um, and so even though I got along well, I didn't fully feel like part of a group. Sometimes some of the guys would go off to like talk about, something personal or important or whatever. And like they'd ask a few of the guys to come and they wouldn't ask me, which, made sense, but also like just made me feel like more of an outsider. So I would like, I'd talk to people, but I'd also kind of sit by myself, and I'd mostly just try and stick around Carter and just kind of be there quietly, just observing. Um, because at least like I knew Carter pretty well. And so it again continued like that for a while. And because of that, I didn't have like feel like I really belonged. And so I didn't fully feel like I belonged in the church. And so still, even up to this point, like toward the end of my sophomore year of high school, I still didn't really connect with like all the sermons and stuff, which I think good sermons are some of the most important things for building your faith, like getting that weekly reminder of like what things are important and whatnot. So I still wasn't really connecting with the sermons, because I needed that close friend group, that I needed to feel like I belonged in the church. And that leads to the next thing that like just if I hadn't made one little decision, everything would have gone differently. But this one really, I feel like, is so clearly a miracle. Like this is so clearly from God, the way everything worked out, the way it all fell into line. It's just, it's incredible. Like this is, I think, the most exciting part of my story. So I love music. My primary instrument is violin, but I'd been interested for a while in learning guitar. So I had been looking on Facebook Marketplace for a guitar to buy. And I found some random dude, and he was selling like a beginner's guitar for $150, which the guitar was worth right around that much. So I messaged him. I asked if he'd take $100, and he said yes. So we planned a day to meet, and then it got to that day, and I went to message the guy to be like, "Hey, we still good to meet today?" And when I messaged him, the message wouldn't send. And so my mom and I looked into it, and mostly me actually, because I'm more of the tech person. But still, we looked into it and we figured out that he had blocked us. Um, for some reason, I don't know why. My best guess is he found someone else that was willing to pay full price, and then he didn't want to like say anything about it to us, and so he just sold it to them and then blocked us. But I don't know. So that was really weird, and that was like I'd been waiting for like a week to meet this guy. So finally, like we had that specific day that we had planned, and I waited all that time for that day, and then he blocks us. So I was like, you know what? I'm probably just not going to worry about getting a guitar right now. But before I give up, I'm going to check Facebook Marketplace one more time just in case there's been any new listings in the past week or so. So I go on Facebook Marketplace and I search guitar and I scroll through because I had looked at them multiple times, so I kind of recognized all the posts. And I saw a new post of this really pretty looking guitar, and it was being sold for $275, which was more than I wanted to spend, but I also did have enough money for that. And so I did what I usually do and looked up what the like retail price is and what it usually sells for used and all that stuff. And it was like a $600 guitar being sold for $275. So I sat there for a while and I thought about it. And I was thinking, this is a really good deal. Is it worth spending the extra money for the good deal? Or should I not buy it and just try to get a beginner's guitar? Because that's really what all I need. Um, so after some thinking, I decided that I should at least see if the person will decrease the price. So I open the post, the listing, and I scroll down to message the person. And as I'm typing out the message, I'm like, I should see who this person is that's selling it, just to like make sure they're trustworthy, because this is kind of a crazy deal. And so I look at the name, and the name is JT. And I looked at the account and I realized it was my Sunday school teacher. And the listing had been posted like 2 hours prior. So the listing had been posted right around the same time that the guy blocked me. Um, and so that was like crazy. So I messaged my Sunday school teacher and I said, "Hey, would you give a discount to someone in your Sunday school class?" And then when I saw him on Sunday, he was like, "Hey, I thought about it, and I'll sell it to you for $200," which was a crazy discount. So I agreed, and I bought the guitar from him for $200. He had it up in his office at the church, so I just followed him there, and he showed me it. He also gave me a free like starter amp, and a guitar strap and a cord and all the things I'd need. It was really nice. Um, so then as I'm about to leave, he tells me, "Oh, by the way, I give free guitar lessons on Wednesday nights before the Wednesday night youth service, if you want to come." And so I was like, I can't say no to free guitar lessons. So I show up on a Wednesday, and I got my little guitar lesson from him, and he does it, right shortly before Wednesday night service, youth service. And I was planning to probably just leave after the guitar lesson because I'd never gone to youth because I was scared because I still didn't really feel like I belonged. Um, and so I just felt like I had no reason to stay. So I did the guitar lesson, and then JT like asked if I was gonna stay, and I thought about it, and I was like, I guess I should at least give it a try, because my mom had been like pushing me to try it for a long time, so I was like, I should at least try it. So I went, to where youth was held, and it just so happened that that night was not a usual youth service where they, have a sermon and worship and all that stuff. Instead, it was one of the youth services that they have every once in a while to introduce new people, where they just hang out for a few hours. They have snacks and they have, nine square and games in the gym and all these sorts of things. And so it's just a time to get to know each other, to make friends, and to, become part of the community. And so the way everything lined up to get to this point is just so incredible. And it doesn't stop there. Like, this is only the beginning. So I decided to stay, but I still, again, didn't really feel like I belonged. I didn't know a ton of people super well. So I saw that Carter was playing basketball in the gym. So I went in the gym, I said hi to Carter, and then I sat in the bleachers for a while and watched. And eventually, JT comes in because he saw me just sitting by myself. And he said, "Hey, I've got this guy that I want to introduce to you." And I was like, "Okay." So this guy walks up, and his name's Dallas. And we talked for a little bit, and immediately, like, he was so nice. Like, I I was a pretty social person, but I was still scared talking to new people. But something about Dallas just like instantly puts you at ease. like I was not afraid to talk to him at all. I immediately felt very comfortable. And so um we mostly talked about, like, I told him about how, I write music, and I told him about the songs I'd written, and we talked mostly about music, but also about some other things for like 20, 30 minutes. And it was a great conversation. I felt like, we were really becoming friends. And then he was like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to go play Nine Square. You should come with me." And so I decided, you know what? It's better than sitting in the bleachers doing nothing, and also it's an opportunity to keep getting to know Dallas. So I went and I played Nine Square, and we played for like an hour, and I already felt more comfortable just having this one friend there, and so I was more energetic, and I talked to more people, and I got to know a lot of people just through playing Nine Square with them. And so after that, I now had Dallas as a friend, and I felt like I knew a lot of the people at least a little bit better. And so that was really the beginning of a big shift. And so I already felt a lot better that upcoming Sunday. And then the following Wednesday, I show up for the guitar lesson, and JT is like, "Hey, I invited another person to come to our guitar lesson." And at first I was like, a little, I don't know, upset's not the right word, but um I knew that I'd get less, individualized attention, which would then potentially make it take longer for me to, grow in my guitar skills. Um, so at first I was a little concerned about that. Um, but then the person shows up, and she looked really familiar. Like I was pretty sure I recognized her from before quarantine, but I could not remember her name. Um, so she was introduced to me. Her name was Kendra. Her name is Kendra. I don't know. She's not dead. Um, her name's Kendra, and we just like immediately clicked. We talked, quite a bit during the guitar lesson, and then like it was just she was so great. Um, like truly one of the coolest people I've ever met. And so afterward, we, went our separate ways, and I think I probably sat with Dallas during the service. And then I played Nine Square after the service was over, and I played it for a while. And I actually got to I just like remember this moment very distinctly. I got to the King Square right in the middle. And as I did, I saw that Kendra was going to the back room to get her guitar and leave. And I was like, this person's really cool. I want to get to know her better. I want her phone number. Um, which, up to this point, I'd never, asked a girl for their phone number before. Actually, I had once, but then she ghosted me. Um, so it was like it was kind of scary, even though it was just like, because I thought she was like a cool friend. I don't know. Anyway, um, so, so I intentionally got myself out when I was in the King Square, and I was like, "Oh no!" Anyway, I gotta go, and so I made an excuse that I had to leave, that I was supposed to leave early or whatever, and so I went back to also get my guitar, and I ran into her as she was about to leave, and I did what is now my classic move, where I was like, "Hey, that song I told you about that I'm currently in the middle of writing, if you want to hear what I've written so far, I could text it to you." And she was like, "Oh, sure." And so I got her phone number. And then after that point, we started texting pretty often, and we still like we got along very well. Um, so then every Wednesday and every Sunday we would like every Wednesday we would, go to guitar lessons, we'd hang out, have fun, and then we would sit together during the Wednesday night service, and then we'd hang out after service and talk. And um and then on Sundays we would hang out like after Sunday school and like before service. And sometimes we'd hang out outside of church. We went to like multiple like festivals. And oh, what else did we do? One time we went to like a Lego store, and then we got food at the mall, and like we hung out and we did all this fun stuff, and she was a great friend. And through that experience, I finally had like a really close friend, and like I finally started to feel like I belonged. And because I had such a close friend in Kendra, it also made me more confident to become more, I don't know, I can't think of the right word, but more like extroverted with the guys. And so I slowly it was a process, but I slowly became a bigger part of the main like guys friend group, Carter and all the friends, Carter and Dallas and all those people. And eventually, after a while, it finally reached a point where, it was almost as if I'd been there the whole time. I was just as important to the group as everyone else. And so finally at that point, I had th- Kendra, and I had all the guys, and I had so many great friends, and that really put me in a great position where like I sat with my friends during service, and with the combination of the Sunday sermons and the Wednesday night sermons, I was finally like paying attention and learning and growing in my faith. And it was so great. And then we started a Bible study with some of the guys, and that was really great. um and then eventually it hit my senior year and of high school. And that was a really, really hard year. Like there were a lot of great things, but I was really depressed. Like it was my worst moment. There at times, I was even suicidal. Um and it was rough. It was really bad. Um but I truly think like my faith is what kept me alive through that. Like if I hadn't, had those experiences, if God hadn't done those miracles in my life to get me to where I was in my faith, I I don't know. Like I really don't know. I can't say for certain if I'd be alive today, you know? Um so I'm very, very grateful for that. Um but yeah, so my faith got me through it, but it was also really hard on my faith. Part of it was that I dated someone for 5 months who like was not a Christian, and that was hard. And it also kind of made me a little scared to fully express like my beliefs because I didn't want to it was my first actual relationship, and so I was scared to end it. So even though, I was unhappy in that relationship for a long time because I, realized like she wasn't really, a Christian. um I was scared for it to end. And so instead of acknowledging the issues, I instead like kind of suppressed my own faith, which was really bad, obviously. And also meant that even when we broke up, that was still an issue, because I'd been kind of acting that way for, 5 months. Um, and so the rest of that year, like, I was still a Christian, I still had my faith, but there were like I don't know, I was really hard on myself, and there were just a lot of things that like if I truly trusted God and I truly like believed, that I was made in his image and that he loved me and all these things, like I wouldn't have struggled as much as I did. And so in a way, even though I didn't feel like I was sort of doubting God. Um and so it took a good friend of mine, named Emma. She really helped me through all of that, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But she called me out on that for sure, and I really, I really appreciate it. Um, so eventually got through senior year, and I that summer, the beginning of the summer, we had this trip for academic team, which is like academic trivia. It's also called Scholar Bowl, and we went to Atlanta for nationals. And it should have been great. There were like looking back, there were so many great things that we did on that trip. It should have been really fun. The problem is I was already, still really depressed. Um and I was away from home, and for some reason, I'm not gonna say the name of this friend just because it's like they don't need to know who they are. Um, but for some reason, I had spent the last like month or two at least convincing myself that this friend hated me. And this friend clearly did not hate me. Like she liked they liked me, they looked up to me, whatever. But like I just decided like, oh, they must hate me. And it was I don't know, like I think it wasn't so much that I don't think I actually thought they hated me. I think I just was like, well, I'm really depressed and I need a reason to be depressed. So let me just come up with things to be upset about. Um, so that's not really good. Um, and so I didn't like talk to anybody else on the trip about that. And it I was like really freaked out and depressed. Like I really don't think that's the main reason that the trip was really bad. I think I made it worse for myself. I'm really good at like the brain's like thought spirals where you start with one thought and then it just spirals all the way to like, oh my gosh, the world's ending or whatever. Um that was definitely a big issue. I was a massive overthinker up to this point as well. So so that was not good. And that was the absolute rock bottom for my mental health. Like that is the worst state I've ever been in. So, given what I've already said, you can imagine how bad that must have been. Um, so finally when I got back from that trip, it was so bad mentally that it finally hit me got me to a point where I sort of snapped out of the spiral I'd been in for the past like year. And like I said, I've struggled with, self-esteem and mental health for a lot of my life. I just never really acknowledged it or fully realized, and so it just got worse and worse until it finally reached senior year and everything, fell apart. But I finally kind of snapped out of it and realized like I need to do something about this. I can't just continue to wallow in my own sorrows. I need to actually fix this. Um, so after that, I spent the whole summer really focusing on myself and growing as a person. I apologized to my friends for not telling them about what was going on or for telling them too much about what was going on or you know anything like everything I did wrong. I worked on making it better with all the people that were impacted by it. And once I was finally through with that, I just, I really put everything I had into my relationship with God because I knew that was the only thing that could get me out of that. So I continued to I could still go to youth at this point because that wasn't until the next school year started that they'd kick me out. So I was going to youth and I was going to Sunday school and Sunday service and Bible study and just like everything I could. Making sure I was spending time reading my Bible and praying every day and all these things. Um, and I wrote a lot about of like analyzing my mental health and why I felt the way I felt and all these sorts of things and what issues I struggled with and how to get over it. And I spent the whole summer working on that. And now I'm finally where I am now, where I'm in my second semester at a Christian college. um I have gotten so much better about overthinking, about handling my emotions, about talking to people about like the things going on in my life. I've i've been able to distance myself from a lot of the situations and the people in the past that were bringing me down. um I'm I have a much better control over my overthinking tendencies. Um, I have a much better and like different view on I didn't really mention this, but a much better and different view on like relationships. I'm much more content with my life and with being single until, God shows me the right person type of thing. Um, and just in every conceivable way, I am in a much better place than I was my senior year, and I am in the best place both mentally and spiritually that I have been in my entire life. Things are great. It's so nice being at a Christian college, because I still get to, I go to Sunday school. I go to Sunday service. There's like a Wednesday night like adult thing that we do called scriptures, and then there's also Thursday night young adults group. And then our school has chapel every Wednesday and Friday, and what else? Oh, there's also an optional chapel on Mondays that I go to sometimes. It just depends. Uh, and even like my classes, just I have actual, Bible classes, which are great, but also even the other classes, it's still like in the end it's still a Christian discussion, like even whether it's biology or psychology or whatever, history, it always in some way relates back to God and his creation and his plans for us and all these things. And it's so great. Like this is the best point I've been in, and I truly believe that if I were to go through everything that, like all of the external factors from my senior year of high school, if those were to happen to me again, I would be able to handle it very, very differently. So, yeah, in conclusion, it took me a while to get to where I am, just because you grow up in, a Christian family doesn't necessarily mean that, like, your parents can instill Christian values in you, but they can't form that relationship for you with God. Um, and it just it takes time. It can take a lot of time. It took me up until, I was like 15, 16 to really start forming that relationship with God. And even now, I'm still always working on growing. That's something you'll always be working on. So even if you feel like you're not in the right place right now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Like you can do it. It just takes time and effort. um, and there's so many resources. And the biggest thing I can advocate for, the most important thing in my opinion, is having a community, having a group of people surrounding you that will build your faith, that will build you up, and that will make you feel comfortable and like you belong where you're at. Um, I'm very glad to be alive. I'm very glad to be at the point I am in my life, and I am so glad to have my relationship with God. So thank you all for listening. This ended up being much longer than I expected, but I hope it, it helped you, helped you learn something. I don't know. Um, expect more Drew Yaps eventually. I just don't know when. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.